Thanks to the materials publicized by Warhorse Studios recently, we now have a glimpse at Kingdom Come Deliverance 2's gameplay that can be examined. In this video, I'll share with you my observations and informed assumptions with regards to its melee combat system, using the footage from their official presentation and those covered by GameSpot as well as IGN. A handful of features from KCD1 seem to have been retained, but an even bigger portion comprised of changes that rectified most issues encountered from it. Some of them are integrations, and possibly even the removal of one or two functionalities as a way to simplify its mechanics. We'll be looking at all of these today, so let's begin. In the first game, there is an unstoppable move that allows us to defend and attack at the same time, called a Master Strike. It was put in place by the developers as supposedly an advanced move, but instead, this kind of attack became ubiquitous for two reasons. Apart from being available to a player very early in the game, it's also quite easy to pull off, because all we have to do is press block as an opponent's attack animation begins, and it will work regardless. On top of this, just about every type of enemy knows how to do it. From men-at-arms who participate in the Rothai tourney, to bandits and humans we meet on the road, they all have the potential to pull it off. This created a situation where players are compelled to rely on Master Strikes, because it's one of the few ways we can effectively defeat an enemy while keeping our characters safe. This is a crucial factor, especially when we're dealing with an entire group. The unfortunate side effect, however, is that it rendered other fighting techniques, such as dodge attacks and combos, inferior by comparison. Now, by the looks of it, Warhorse Studios seems to have addressed this issue on both the player and enemy sides. None of the peasants shown in the official gameplay showcase pulled off a Master Strike, and the one who did, an unnamed alchemist, seems to be a high-level combatant, because he has more HP compared to the Dicers, and defended himself quite well, using a shield as well as through dodging. But it's hard to be certain if they're based on a percentage chance tied to an enemy's level, or if there's some other factor. The only thing we can tell, for now at least, is that the chances of it happening seems to have been lessened overall. As for the Kuttenberg Swordmaster and Hans Capon, I have an idea as to why they never did a Master Strike, but we'll talk about that later. Meanwhile, on the player side, our old trick of watching an enemy's shoulders while we wait to press block as they start attacking will no longer work, because it looks like the timing has been adjusted, and therefore makes them harder to pull off. But in order for us to understand exactly what's going on, we'll need to be aware of some conflicting information between the gameplay footages. In the preview videos, there were some minute observations about melee combat that I initially thought would be carried over until the game's release. For example, riposts after doing perfect blocks require a bit of stamina, and the pool itself regenerates over time, just like in KCD1. However, in the official gameplay showcase, riposts didn't eat up stamina, and it regenerated almost instantly every time Henry caught a break. So I'm not sure what's going on here, other than maybe the character used for this presentation was at a high level in disguise. There are also portions of the defense mechanics that were seen in one video, but not on the other, although I have some idea on how most of these might function. Before we talk about them, you should be aware that there's a very good chance the simplified blocking mechanics from KCD1 is still in place, meaning our character will automatically block in the direction of an attack, so we can just focus on the timing. We can see this happen in one segment of Henry's fight against the alchemist. This is great because when an enemy is about to strike, a green shield icon will pop up as an early warning. In contrast to what would happen in the first game, pressing block while it's displayed will result in a normal block that has a stamina cost, and there's a slight delay before we can do a follow-up strike. But if we wait for the enemy's weapon to start flying towards Henry, that green shield will have a glint on its back. Pressing the same button at this moment will result in a perfect block that has no stamina drain, and a riposte can be launched immediately afterwards. However, I noticed something peculiar going on with this counterattack. Right before the opposing weapons clash, the glinted shield will be replaced by a pair of blue crossed swords. On first inspection, this icon might seem related to ripostes, but there's no difference in the animation, regardless if the player initiated a strike when it was on display or afterwards. What's it actually for? On top of that, we never saw this icon in the official demo, despite the fact that their player pulled off a perfect block several times, and in one instance, it even led to a master strike. Why was this icon hidden? Law of Simplicity suggests that the blue swords might be a bonus damage when we riposte while this icon is active. However, I also suspect that it's related to master strikes, where it might happen if we delay our blocks right before an enemy's attack touches Henry. This would make it very challenging to pull off, because pressing block just a hair late means getting hit. It's one scenario when the broken red shield icon can be seen. The other is if we're already holding it before an enemy begins to attack. I won't be surprised if master strikes turn out to be like this, because other action RPGs such as Ghost of Tsushima, Sekiro, and Lies of P have a similar feature. The only reason I could think of as to why we never saw them in the previews could be that they were disabled in that demo, which might explain why both Swordmaster Menhard and Hans Capon never got to do it. Since the chances of enemies pulling off a master strike seems to have been reduced, and is now possibly harder to execute, it's most likely that a huge chunk of our fighting would be spent exchanging blocks and counterattacks, as assisted by the icons. These things, however, have a couple of limitations that we need to be informed about. First off, it doesn't appear while we're attacking or defending. That's why we never saw them in the example I pointed out earlier, because the player was pressing and holding block as the alchemist tried to land hits. Second, they won't show up if there's a mismatch in the fighting type between Henry and his opponent, which explains why there was no shield icon when the player got hit by a back fist. He already got his longsword equipped. But the one which has a substantial impact is when we're engaging several enemies, because the combat star itself will momentarily disappear as we switch between them. This is a real shame because the shield icon will also warn us of any incoming attack from an assailant off-screen. It's a slight setback, but there's nothing to worry about, because group fighting in KCD2 seems to have been drastically improved. In one of our previous videos, I talked about the challenges of taking on multiple foes in the first game. Apart from the fact that they could pull off a master strike, they also have a habit of rushing towards Henry to surround him and take turns landing hits. It's a huge problem that's very difficult to fend off. Thankfully, this issue seems to have been rectified in the sequel. Enemies will now walk and spread out, maintaining a combat stance as they carefully approach. This gives us valuable time in strategizing where we should be and who to attack first, while maintaining the threat of getting blindsided in a fair manner. In addition, combat in general, regardless if it's against a group or a duel, no longer feels constrained. This is best illustrated when we examine participants in the Ratai tourney. You can see here that even though both fighters are able to freely move around, it feels like they're tethered to each other, a connection that's only momentarily cut when someone attacks. Judging by the videos we've been shown so far, this will no longer be a problem in the sequel. And I suspect that agile character builds might be formidable this time around, especially now that dodging seems to be quite useful. Apart from the fact that this action still doesn't cost stamina, it also received an interesting upgrade. If we take another look at one portion of Henry's fight against the alchemist, we can see here that it's now possible to avoid attacks while holding block. This means that there's a new trick that can be done, which involves defending against a strike while evading to one side, called a deflection parry, as demonstrated by Hans in the preview. Now at first glance, it might seem like sustained blocking is an impenetrable defense, but according to what we know in KCD1, landing combinations is one way to break it, which is why I was on the lookout for them in the gameplay footages, but they were never shown. The other way to break continuous blocking is by attacking from a clinch, and there were a couple of examples shown in the previews. From what I can tell, getting into this weapon pushing position is still an automatic prompt as we approach an enemy. Instead of a pommel strike or a kick, winning this contest will now allow us to land a combination up close. But in the event that we lose such a face-off, we'll still be given the chance to defend, as the shield icons we talked about earlier will also show up here. In one instance, we can even see the player land a counter right after doing so. I'm just not sure if it's still possible to spam clinch strikes like in the first game, because the actions we can do seem to cost a lot of stamina. And as shown in one portion of IGN's preview, its regeneration will now stop for several seconds if it gets completely drained. Most of what we covered so far are subtle adjustments that aim to simplify the mechanics and balance the difficulty of combat. But there's also one major change and several unanswered questions that I think is worth pointing out. As you've probably seen already, the combat star's hit zones have been reduced from 5 to 4. When using a sword, the left, right, and upwards directions are assigned to slashes, but the 6 o'clock position has been mapped to thrust attacks instead of having its own button. At first I thought maybe it was just a coincidence that the cursor was pointed downwards when the player did the thrust, but the same thing happened every time a strike was launched from there across all 3 videos. If you rewatch them, you'll notice that the player and every other fighter never swung their weapon at a low angle, so those 2 hit zones from KCD1 have been possibly removed, and are now likely integrated with combination attacks as shown in the game reveal video. We also got introduced to a lot of perks we've never seen before, and I can only guess as to what most of them do. The only ones related to our topic that gave off a clue is called the Mountain, which I think temporarily removes a normal block stamina requirement, and an unnamed perk that fills up every time we land a hit, most likely similar to the first game's Chain Strike, which increases our damage per charge. I wish we knew more about their effects, because they could potentially influence the balance of combat entirely. But even how they function is a mystery. Are they conditional buffs that automatically trigger when a certain requirement is met? Or can we activate them manually? Master Strikes, meanwhile, seem to have maintained their qualities, except now they automatically transition to a finisher if an enemy's HP is already 0. In theory, feinting attacks is one way to prevent them from happening, because it's designed to throw off the timing of blocks, but we never saw anyone do it in the demos. Did the developers get rid of feints? I won't be surprised if they did, since enemies in KCD1 never utilized that move anyway. But the most puzzling moment among all of them was this one when the player countered Dicer Tonda's attack. Moments before it happened, I know that they were holding the block button, because the red shield icon showed up and never saw the green ones. How it shifted from a defensive pose to a master strike and finisher is beyond my current understanding. This goes to show that even though we know more about KCD2 now, what was put on display is but a mere peek to an otherwise extensive game. How the system works in a fight between sword wielders has been demystified to some capacity, but what happens when other weapons are brought forth is uncertain. In any case, there are still a lot of things left to examine in the gameplay videos, so I'll keep you updated as I find those worth knowing.